And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And that's just cool.
Hey there, I'm Joe Nassise,
I'm Tom Leveen.
and this is Ep.1 of Spoken into Existence.
Spoken is the future of storytelling, a place where writers can voice cast, narrate, self-publish, socialize, stream, and eventually monetize audio versions of their work using AI. Now, for the first time ever, two acclaimed authors, Joseph Nassise and Tom Leveen, are teaming up with Spoken to co-create an audiobook in real time as it's being written. Across these 5 episodes, you'll watch them write for audio, cast voices, and publish, all on one platform. This is a behind-the-scenes look at the blueprint of a new era in storytelling.
You know, Tom and I have been kicking around this idea to jointly write a story focused on the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse for a couple years now. And as we mentioned last week, we actually came up with a title for this thing. It's going to be called Sackcloth and Blood, which we will explain in a few minutes. But the concept here is basically we're going to write a story where the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are the heroes rather than the villains. Yeah. And, I think that trend continues. You know, we wanted to tell a story where everything you might think about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse gets turned on their head and comes out the exact opposite, starting with the fact that they're the heroes. And our goal is to give you an unpredictable, ever-changing storyline that keeps you on the edge of your seat. And, still has plenty of thrills, chills, and scares to really, bring it home.
It's not going to be what you would typically expect from either of those genres, I think, which is going to be lots of fun.
Sackcloth and Blood. It would have been easier just to call it the Horsemen, right? I mean,
Yes.
but again, the Horsemen would have been expected and would have been obvious. And, we want to push the obvious and the expected to the side. So where did we come up with Sackcloth and Blood, and why did we settle on that as a title?
So the title came from a reference in the Book of Revelation. This is from the King James Version, for those of you keeping track at home. It's from chapter 6, verse 12, which reads, "And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood." And that's just cool. That's right out of a horror novel, right? So it's got a really good sibilance isn't the right word, but it's just got a good sound to it, I think. And these are the kinds of things that not only matter to us as writers of prose, but also in the audio, like sackcloth and blood. Those are really fun words to kind of play with, so that was a piece of it.
I think you're right. The words have weight. And it goes back to the idea of, hey, this isn't run of the mill. This isn't, death on the rider on the pale horse. Maybe his horse is pale, maybe it's not. We'll have to see.
Is it a horse? I don't know.
There you go. Sackcloth and Blood, as we've kind of designed it over the last couple weeks, is going to be a 5-book novella series, with each of the first books focusing on one of the individual horsemen, war, famine, pestilence, and death. And then we're going to have a 5th book that brings them all together to face off against the big bad guy who's been driving everything over the last several volumes. And I think that's going to be great. I think it's going to be fun. It'll be interesting. We have a character that kind of ties all of the novellas together. A character named Sister Mary Agnes, who, as you so eloquently put it last week, is a combat boot wearing, chain smoking, Catholic nun whose main weapon is a ruler that she keeps hidden up her sleeve, in which
Yep.
she uses to discipline the horsemen when that the time comes. And we call her the Harbinger. She's the character that kind of, brings everything together and provides that bridge from one volume to the next.
Mhm.
But our first volume is going to focus on the character of War.
Mhm.
And the other horsemen get mentioned a little bit, but for primarily, based on what we've already started writing and are getting
Mm.
well along in, she's our main focus this time around. Oops, I said it. I said she, right?
Yep.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about War? Who is she, and what makes her different than, say, the standard personification that people might be familiar with?
So all of the horsemen in the series are incarnations of the various horsemen, the war, famine, pestilence, and death, and they change as history rolls on. So there's been a different person, um, human person who sort of embodies this persona or this character over time, and when they pass away, then somebody else gets kind of handed the mantle and carried on. And at this particular point in time, when the story takes place, the incarnation of War has taken root in a 17-year-old girl named Moxie Kirk, who is a punk chick. And she is also, at the time that we meet her, we're pretty sure the story is going to open actually at a protest where she is protesting the proliferation of nuclear weapons. So, not the kind of person you would expect is going to be the incarnation of War, which again is already one of the subversions that we're kind of working into the story to keep readers and readers on their toes and keep this story moving in a kind of a fresh direction. But one of the abilities that she sort of inherits as being the incarnation of War is that there is no weapon on the face of the earth, either currently or in the past, that she does not know how to use and use very effectively. And that's going to become an important plot point as time goes on and the story continues to develop. But she's a lot of fun. She's a reluctant hero. She does not want this responsibility. And so when Sister Mary Agnes shows up and says, "Guess what? It's time to ride, horseman," she's like, "Nope." And that's one of our immediate conflicts right out of the gate. So we've gotten that far in the story.
And I think that's one of the real highlights of the story so far for me is that, yes, it's the Four Horsemen, but really it's honest and deep literature at the same time. It's we're telling we're telling things that matter, and we want to use this concept to get out important issues and talk about important things. So
Uh,
I'm just thrilled. It's going to be a blast, and we're already having a blast putting this stuff together
mhm.
so far and coming up with the characters and all that kind of stuff.
I believe we talked about it with the guys last time, but I'm also excited to help bring this to life for other authors, which is another whole piece of this, particularly for authors who do not have access to the kind of resources that some other authors do, independent or otherwise, to bring these things to life and to bring some sense of democratization back to that, so that there will be literally nothing stopping a creator of any age or any background or any place in the world from making an audiobook on their own. And I think that's incredibly just an incredible tool to be able to offer to other creators. So hopefully this will mean nobody's going to be left behind.
Yeah, 100% agree.
I mean, we both have experience with our publishers, for example, hiring out to do audiobooks. That's kind of one of the happens in, like, I guess you'd call it a boilerplate contract, right? They're buying or licensing rather the paperback rights, the hardcover rights, the audio, all this kind of stuff. And sometimes they make the audiobook and then sometimes they don't, which is always frustrating. And so to have an opportunity, particularly with something where we control all the rights from the get-go and go straight to audio with it, is a pretty unique scenario for us, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny. I'm not particularly an audiobook listener,
Hmm.
but I've always wanted to make sure that as many of my books as possible were available in audio, because I know there are a lot of people out there that's how they consume, their reading content.
Yeah.
Andrew said it last week in the introduction. Like, he and Phil are basically audio only kind of guys.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's the audience, that I don't normally reach And so I'm looking to do so. And it was one of the factors that drove me into considering this idea was that, hey, here's a brand new way to reach some of those people.
I love the spoken word, and I love the audio experience. So this is super cool. It's kind of a convergence of all my favorite things, actually.
With this project, I think we're going for a middle road. I think we're
I think so.
gonna do multi voices and a narrator covering some of the material, and see where that takes us. And I
Yeah.
know as the project goes on and as Spoken's tool belt kind of grows and multiplies, we'll be able to do more and more, which is one of the exciting aspects of it all. I think that's one of the most exciting things about tools like Spoken, to their tool set, is that we can now look at projects that weren't viable as audiobooks previously, or we can experiment with different projects to see, how they might sound as audio, and is there a readership for short stories or novella length stories or things of that nature in audio that we haven't been able to explore previous to this. We really write kind of from two different, not viewpoints, but starting points.
Yeah.
I'm a guy that's all about the action and all about the structure and, all about the plot. Those are the things that really drive a lot of my fiction.
Mhm.
And you're the opposite, I think.
Yeah, I think it's my theater background. I tend to start from a place of dialogue and character, because where I come from, if you think of the biggest, most incredible sort of Broadway show that you've ever seen, every single one of those actors should, before they're in the show, they should be able to stand on stage in their street clothes and belt that thing out and blow you away in the audience. If you can't do that with just your body and just the words that you're given, because in theater, that's really all we get. All we get is our words, right? And if the story doesn't hang on that, if the story and the performance, so to speak, is not compelling based on that, then you can add all the lights and sound effects and costumes you want. It's not going to help. So yeah, I definitely tend to come from a place of, well, who are these people and how do they talk? What's their rhythm and tone? And how does what they say and how they say it continue to move the plot forward?
I think every
Yeah.
time we sit down and write a story, or in this case, write and then narrate a story, we're looking to give our listeners, our readers, that emotional experience to
Mhm.
let them put themselves in the character's shoes and take that journey with them and really immerse themselves in it. And I
Mhm.
think it's one of the things that's so great about Spoken is that, we can take what we've produced as words, as writing,
Yeah.
and then turn that into an experience that they listen to.
Yes.
And the act of listening is an immersive experience in and of itself, so that they have to really
Mhm.
sit down and pay attention to what's going on and let the story carry them through it. Let them become Moxie for,
Yeah.
however long the story lasts. And
Mhm.
and I think that's gonna be just absolutely terrific. I'm so excited. Next week, we start looking at the platform and talking about casting, and
Mhm.
like you said, your theater experience and the fact that you hear these characters in your head first, I think you mentioned that last week, is
Mhm.
is going to be a big part of, okay, what does Sister Mary Agnes sound like? She's
Yeah.
she's chain smoking. What has that done to her voice? And how does she relate to 17-year-old Moxie? And what does Moxie sound like? And
Mhm.
I think I've got that Sister Mary Agnes in my head. I think I can
Mhm.
hear her. I'm not quite sure I can hear Moxie yet. And or let me rephrase that. I can hear Moxie, but she's probably not the same Moxie you're hearing
Probably
as
not.
I write this
Mhm.
thing, right? So
Yeah.
we it'll be interesting to see as we look at some of these voices and as we start to assign voices to
Mhm.
characters. Okay, what happens if your idea of what Moxie sounds like is so very different than my idea of what Moxie sounds like? How do we bridge that gap and pull it together?
Yeah.
And I know we will, but it'll be an
Mhm.
exciting adventure to participate in that, to actually do that, right?
Oh yeah, it is. I can, I didn't do a lot of playwriting in my theater days, but I did a few shows, just because it was fun to do. And I can tell you, it is for us, and I think for other creators as they get onboarded with Spoken, it is a heady experience to write something and then hear it come back to you in a professional way. Is just like wow, like that's something that I did, and it's an immediate feedback, and it's kind of a thrill, honestly, just to hear that stuff come alive for you. And so I think that's going to be a great experience for both of us.
We're happy to have you. Thrilled that you're tuning in, listening. Can't wait to bring this story to life for you. Next week, we're going to come back around and we're going to talk about what it means to give these characters their voices and using the platform to start looking at, how do we select these voices, and what kind of actors are we looking for? What kind of voices are we looking for? What kind of backgrounds do we want them to have? What is the sound that we're looking for? So, we'll be doing all of that. We'll talk about some of our experience with previous audiobooks and whether we had them done by major publishers or whether we did them ourselves, and what were the costs and the effort and all that involved, and how is that going to differ from what we're doing with spoken. So that's our plan for next week. We hope you tune in, and we really look forward to having you back here on Spoken into Existence. Take care, all.
Take care.
Make sure to follow along as this one-of-a-kind story takes shape. You'll find new behind-the-scenes episodes right here, plus bonus content all throughout the series. Follow us on socials at spoken.press, and be sure to follow the authors too, at Tom Leveen and at Nassise on X. Joseph and Tom are also on Facebook, at joseph.nassise and author Tom Leveen. Or you can join the discussion in our communities over on Reddit and Discord. We'd love to hear your thoughts as the story unfolds. This is Storytelling Reimagined, and we're just getting started.